All right, everyone. First off, congratulations on your new roles as officers. As the company's legal counsel, I'm here to walk you through one of the most fundamental concepts you'll need to master, the scope of our company's legal powers. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but this isn't just some boring legal lecture. Getting this right is about protecting the company and, frankly, protecting yourselves from some pretty serious risks. So let's dive right in. So, what are corporate powers? The absolute best way to get your head around this is with an analogy. I want you to think of our corporation as having a passport, one that's issued by the government. But this passport doesn't list countries. Instead, it lists actions and purposes. It spells out in black and white where our company can legally go and what it can legally do. As an officer, it's your job to make sure every single business decision has a valid stamp in this passport. To make sure this is crystal clear, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining this corporate passport. Then we'll check out the authorized powers, the approved destinations, if you will. From there, we'll get into the really crucial part. Ultra-virus acts. What happens when you wander off the map. We'll cover the consequences and how to fix a mistake, and then we'll wrap up with a super practical compliance checklist to keep you on the straight and narrow. Okay, so let's start with the absolute foundation, defining your authority. This corporate passport doesn't just materialize out of thin air. So where does it actually come from? Your authority flows from two main sources. First, you've got the revised corporation code. That's the law of the land for every corporation out there. And second, and this is specific to us, you have our company's own articles of incorporation. That's the charter we filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. You put those two together, and that's it. That's your passport. It's the legal framework that gives us the right to exist and to act. Now that we know where this passport comes from, let's flip it open and take a look at the approved destinations. What are the powers we're actually granted? What are we allowed to do? The core of our authority is spelled out in Section 35 of the Revised Corporation Code. This gives us all the fundamental rights you'd expect. Things like suing someone or being sued, owning property that's related to our business, and even making reasonable donations to charity. It also gives us the power to team up with other companies through partnerships and mergers. But here's the important one. It includes a kind of catch-all clause that lets us do whatever is essential to achieve our company's stated purpose. Think of these as the main highways on your map. So if those are the approved destinations, what happens when the company tries to travel to a place that isn't in its passport? This brings us to the most critical part of this entire briefing, ultra-virus acts. It's just a fancy Latin term that means beyond the powers. And the law couldn't be clearer on this. Section 44 draws a very hard line in the sand. It basically says a corporation cannot, under any circumstances, exercise powers it hasn't been granted by the law or its own charter. Any action you take that steps over this line is an ultra-virus act, and legally speaking, it's considered voidable. So what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's break it down with a few simple examples. A real estate company buying land to build a subdivision? Of course, that's perfectly within its purpose. That's inside the passport. But that same company donating corporate funds to a political campaign? Nope, that's an ultra-virus act. Or how about a software firm paying for coding classes for its employees? That's a totally legitimate business expense. But that same company buying a luxury yacht for the CEO's personal use? That's not a corporate purpose, and it's clearly outside the passport. The key question you always have to ask is this. Is this action directly related to achieving the business purpose written in our charter? Now, here's where it gets interesting. While the consequences for these acts are really severe, the law actually gives us a way to navigate a mistake. But first, let's be very clear about the risks involved. Under Section 158 of the Code, the SEC has some pretty heavy hammers it can bring down. And we're talking serious stuff here. Administrative sanctions can include fines up to 2 million pesos, a permanent order to stop what you're doing, or even the corporate equivalent of the death penalty, suspending or completely dissolving the company. This is no joke. And believe me, these aren't just theoretical threats on paper. Committing an ultra-virus act exposes the company and, potentially you as officers, to huge financial and operational risk. It can trash your reputation and pull you into incredibly expensive legal battles. This really drives home why staying within your authorized powers is just fundamental to good governance. But what if a mistake is made? Is there a way back? Well, yes, there is a legal cure, and it's called ratification. But the process is really strict. First, there has to be complete, total, transparent disclosure to the stockholders about what happened. Second, the act has to be approved or ratified by a supermajority vote, We're talking stockholders who represent at least 2/3 of the company's capital stock. That is a very, very high bar to clear, which really underlines just how serious the original misstep was. So, how do we stay on the right track and avoid all these headaches in the first place? To help you out, I've put together a simple, practical checklist you can use as your guide. Here it is, your 3-point compliance checklist. Number 1, know your charter. Make it a habit to regularly read our articles of incorporation so you instinctively know the specific purpose our company was created for. 2, ensure board authority. Before any major deal goes through, you have to confirm it's within our power, and just as important, that it's backed by a formal board resolution. And 3, when in doubt, ratify. If a decision feels like it's in a gray area, the absolute safest play is to be proactive. Disclose it to the shareholders and get their official approval. So, I'll leave you with one final question to keep in the back of your mind as you lead this company forward. Is every single action you're about to authorize clearly and legally stamped within our corporate passport? Your job is to make damn sure the answer to that question is always yes.